All right, today I want to show you how to mold two of our windows together. This is going to be the same across all of our aluminum systems, so this is specific to our aluminum windows. You can mold UPVC windows, but it's a slightly different process. What we're trying to do in Mulling is we're connecting two window frames together butt to butt. To do that, we have to be careful about our alignment, and we need to make sure we get a really good structural connection. So we're going to go through the steps in doing that. First, let's take a look up close at these two different profiles. So I'm going to use a window corner sample so that you can see what happens on the inside of the profile. This is the interior of the profile, so this goes to the inside of the building, and this is the exterior to the outside of the building. You can see that our profile has a center thermal break, and this is really key to the performance of the window. You do not want to mess with this. It's plastic, it's a polyamide spacer. It's not structurally capable of holding screws or pulling windows together. So you want to focus on getting your screws and holes in the aluminum pieces of the profile. So there's an inner aluminum profile and there's an outer aluminum profile, and we're going to put screws in both of those today. The screws we're going to use are primarily a simple number 10 panhead screw. Okay, so you want something with a very flat shoulder to connect the two frames together. And we want those, this is a number 10 in a 1-inch length. And then we also need some 2-inch number 8s that will connect all the way through. And the reason we're doing that is because, again, if we look at the profile here, the number 10 is going to go towards the interior, the thicker part of the profile here. And we'll actually clearance drill all the way through one of the profiles and then connect it to the other. The number 8s go out here in the outer edge, and here we're not able to clearance drill for the head, so the head will remain visible on the interior of the window. To start the process, what we're going to do is we're going to drill those clearance holes first. And you want to space these holes about every 12 inches. All right, so now that we have our holes drilled, I can show you where they come in on the interior of this profile. So you can see I've opened the profile up, so this is an operable unit. You can see on our inner, we have our two holes here and here. And then on the outer, they're a little bit harder to see because they're behind this gasket. We can go ahead and pull that gasket out for assembling the two profiles together. Okay, so our screws are going to enter from this one. Now, if you have an operable window, you don't need to do any disassembly. You just need to open the window. Okay, if you have a fixed window, which this is a sample fixed profile, you need to go ahead and deglaze the window. Okay, so there's another video you can watch on deglazing a window. Very simple process. You just remove the glazing beads, and this is the same part number as the operable window. So the outer frame of windows, whether they're operable or fixed, is typically the exact same profile. There's some times where we mess with it a little bit, but by and large, it's going to be a very similar profile. All right, so one of the keys to mulling the windows well is to get them lined up perfectly. There's a couple ways that we can do that. The first is using an H profile. So this H profile is sized so that it will slip right in the inner groove between the two windows. Okay, so we can snap this in and it will hold our frames aligned front to back. Okay, so the H profile goes in here. If we're going to use this, we want to go ahead and mount it to one side or the other using screws so that it's not flopping around in there. It doesn't need to be continuous. In fact, oftentimes what I would do is I'd cut this into about 4-inch chunks, and then you can mount that at 3 or 4 spots along the edge of the window, and it will align the two windows. This works really well. You're going to want to use sealant on both sides, and I don't like the fact that you have to use sealant on both sides and it kind of makes a discontinuous seal. So what I recommend doing is instead to use backer rod and a sealant. Since we're doing this as an example and it's temporary, I'm not going to use sealant in this case, but what you want to do is put a full bead of silicone on the inner groove of both windows and out at the outer groove of both windows. Then you can place the backer rod between the two, and when it gets sucked down tight, that backer rod is then pinched in there and will create a good air seal. We can take the quick grip clamp and let's go ahead and use our H profile to hold it aligned. Okay. And you can see, as I have my H profile there, it keeps the window aligned up and down. And I can put a second clamp, I'll put it here on the face. Okay, so that window is nice and connected there, all right? So if we were doing this again, we would have a bead of silicone on, 2 beads of silicone on each window, front, inside and out, and then we would place our backer rod right along there, okay? Now, since we can go ahead and drive our long screws. Since we drilled through the black one, we'll put our long screws through the black one to start with. Okay, and these are just number 8 sheet metal screws, okay? And I'm not piloting them into the white frame, but they are clearance drilled in the black frame, okay? So you just get a sheet metal screw that will go ahead, and the aluminum is soft enough that it will make its own hole, okay? Now you have that nice and flush and it's tight. For the back holes where we're going to use the number 10s, rather than having the head of the screw be visible here, we want to submerge it down into the bottom. So I recommend drilling a pilot hole that's a common size that's pluggable, like 3/8. So now that we have our through hole, we can go ahead and drill a clearance hole for the head. Okay. With that complete, now our screw can go all the way through. Okay, so let's move the camera so you can see that. So you can see now our screw head lives inside the profile. We're left with a clean 3/8 clearance hole that we can buy a plug and fill. We remove our clamps. And we now have a structural mole where these two windows are stuck together. Okay, so you can see they are fully connected. Okay, so again, a couple things that are really important to remember in doing this. We do need to apply sealant both to the inner frame and the outer frame. I like doing that with a neutral silicone that matches the color of the frame, so either white or black in this case. You can use a clear. I then, once I set that bead of silicone on the inside, I lay my backer rod into that bead. Then when I bring the two together, the bead of silicone here hits the other side of the backer rod and really makes a good airtight and weatherproof seal in there. All right?